You've been taught to believe that loyalty is something solid, something permanent, like a bond that once formed can never truly break. But if you step back and observe people without emotion, without illusion, you begin to see a different pattern emerge. Loyalty is not absolute. It is conditional, fragile, and constantly shifting depending on circumstances you often cannot control. What people call real friendship is, more often than not, a temporary alignment of interests, emotions, and convenience. Think about it carefully. When someone stands by you, is it purely because of you or because of how you make them feel, what you provide, or the role you play in their life? The truth is uncomfortable but necessary. Most people remain loyal only as long as the relationship serves them in some way. This doesn't always mean selfishness in a cruel sense. It is simply human nature. People are wired to protect their own interests first. The moment those interests shift, their behavior begins to change, often subtly at first, then all at once. You might have experienced this without fully realizing it. A friend who is always present slowly becomes distant when your status drops. Someone who once supported you begins to criticize you when you no longer meet their expectations. These are not random betrayals. They are predictable outcomes of conditional loyalty. The bond was never as unbreakable as you believed. It was tied to circumstances that quietly held it together. The danger lies in expecting more than what human nature can offer. When you expect absolute loyalty, you set yourself up for disappointment, confusion, and even emotional damage. You start questioning yourself, wondering what you did wrong, when in reality, nothing unusual happened. The conditions simply changed. And when conditions change, people adjust accordingly. This is why the idea of a real friend can be misleading. It creates an illusion that someone will remain constant regardless of time, pressure, or personal gain. But history, experience, and observation all suggest otherwise. Even the closest relationships are tested when faced with competing interests. Some survive longer than others, but very few are immune to change. Understanding this doesn't mean you become cold or isolated. It means you become aware. You stop placing blind trust in the permanence of people's loyalty and start seeing relationships for what they truly are: dynamic, evolving, and influenced by countless external factors. This awareness gives you power. It allows you to manage expectations, protect your emotions, and avoid being caught off guard when people act according to their nature. When you accept that loyalty is conditional, you also begin to rely less on others for emotional security. You stop depending on the idea that someone will always be there, and instead you build strength within yourself. You appreciate people while they are aligned with you, but you are not destroyed when that alignment fades, and that is the shift that changes everything. You no longer chase loyalty, you understand it. If you strip away emotion and look at human behavior with clarity, one truth becomes impossible to ignore. People are driven by self-interest first, always. It doesn't matter how kind, loyal, or close someone appears to be. Beneath every action lies a personal motive, a need, a desire to gain, protect, or maintain something for themselves. This is not necessarily evil. It is simply human nature. But the mistake most people make is assuming that friendship somehow rises above this law, that there exists a space where people act purely for others without any internal calculation. That belief is where disappointment begins. Think about every interaction you've had. When someone supports you, there is often something in it for them, maybe emotional satisfaction, maybe a sense of importance, maybe the comfort of having you in their life. Even acts of generosity carry a psychological reward. People help because it makes them feel good, strengthens their identity, or secures their position in a relationship. The moment those internal rewards begin to fade or are replaced by something more valuable elsewhere, their behavior starts to shift. This is why expecting unwavering loyalty from anyone is dangerous. You are expecting them to go against their own nature. When a situation forces a choice between their benefit and your expectations, most people will choose themselves quietly, subtly, sometimes even without realizing it. And when that moment comes, it often feels like betrayal, but in reality, it is simply self-interest revealing itself. You may have seen this in moments of pressure. When things are easy, when you are strong, successful, or useful, people stay close. They align themselves with you because it benefits them. But when your circumstances change, when you struggle, lose status, or no longer provide the same value, their priorities begin to rearrange. Their attention shifts, their support weakens, and their presence becomes inconsistent. It's not always dramatic. Sometimes it's just a slow fading away. But the pattern is always the same. What makes this even more dangerous is that people rarely admit their self-interest. They will still speak the language of loyalty, friendship, and care, even as their actions begin to contradict those words. This creates confusion. You hold on to what they say while ignoring what they do. And in that gap, you start to question yourself instead of recognizing the truth. Understanding this changes how you see relationships. You stop expecting people to act beyond their nature. You realize that loyalty is often a byproduct of aligned interests, not a permanent commitment. When your path matches theirs, they stay. When it diverges, they drift. It becomes predictable, almost mechanical. But this awareness is not meant to make you cynical. It is meant to make you strategic. When you accept that self-interest governs behavior, you stop relying on others for stability. You become more observant, more grounded, less emotionally dependent. You appreciate people for what they are, not for what you wish them to be. And most importantly, you stop being shocked when people choose themselves, because now you understand that they always will. There is a quiet danger in emotional attachment that most people never recognize until it's too late. The more you become emotionally invested in someone, the less clearly you begin to see them. Your perception shifts not because they have changed, but because your mind starts protecting the image you've built of them. You stop observing reality, and instead, you start defending an illusion. This is where blindness begins. At first, it feels natural. You trust them, you feel connected, and you assume that closeness equals safety. But with that attachment comes expectation. You begin to believe they will act in certain ways, that they will remain consistent, loyal, and aligned with you no matter what. And when small signs appear that contradict this belief, you don't confront them, you ignore them, you explain them away. You tell yourself it's nothing, that they didn't mean it, that the bond you share is stronger than a few inconsistencies. But those small signs are never random. They are signals, subtle shifts in tone, effort, respect, or presence. The problem is not that they exist. The problem is that your emotional attachment filters them out. You are no longer seeing the person as they are. You are seeing them as you need them to be. And this creates a dangerous gap between reality and perception. This is why people are often shocked when someone they trusted deeply acts in a way that feels like betrayal. To an outside observer, the signs may have been obvious all along. But to the one who was emotionally attached, those signs were invisible, not because they weren't there, but because acknowledging them would have threatened the emotional comfort they were holding on to. Emotional attachment also weakens your boundaries. You tolerate behavior that you would never accept from someone else. You give more chances, more understanding, more patience, hoping that things will return to how they once felt. But in doing so, you slowly lower your standards. You send a message, not through words, but through your actions, that certain behaviors are acceptable. And over time, people adjust to that. They take more, respect less, and invest only as much as they feel is necessary. The deeper the attachment, the stronger this effect becomes. You start prioritizing the relationship over your own clarity. You fear losing the connection, so you avoid difficult truths. You stay silent when you should question. You hold on when you should step back. And all of this reinforces the imbalance, but the reality is simple and uncomfortable. Attachment does not change human nature. It only changes your ability to see it. No matter how much you care about someone, they are still driven by their own interests, emotions, and circumstances. Your feelings do not make them immune to change, nor do they guarantee loyalty. When you begin to understand this, something shifts. You don't stop caring, but you start observing. You allow yourself to see actions without immediately justifying them. You separate what you feel from what is actually happening. And in that space, clarity returns. You realize that the strongest position is not one of emotional blindness, but of controlled awareness. You can be connected, but not consumed. You can value some, but still see them clearly. And when you do, you protect yourself from the quiet damage that comes from expecting people to live up to an image they were never bound to maintain. And that is when attachment stops being your weakness and becomes something you control. There comes a moment in every interaction where silence becomes more powerful than words, but most people never learn how to use it correctly. They speak too much, explain too much, react too quickly, and in doing so, they give away control. What they don't realize is that constant availability and immediate response lower your perceived value. When you are always there, always replying, always engaging, people stop respecting your presence because it becomes predictable, and anything predictable becomes easy to ignore. Silence, when used with intention, creates tension. It forces the other person to think, to question, to fill the gap you've left behind. And in that space, their mind starts working in your favor. They begin to wonder, why didn't you respond? Did they say something wrong? Are you losing interest? This uncertainty shifts the dynamic. Instead of you seeking their attention, they begin seeking yours. But this only works if your silence is controlled, not emotional. If you are ignoring someone out of frustration, anger, or insecurity, it will show. Your energy will leak through in other ways: passive aggression, inconsistency, or eventual overreaction. That kind of silence weakens you. It makes you look unstable, not powerful. True strategic silence comes from discipline. It is calm, deliberate, and free from emotional chaos. You have to understand that people value what they have to work for. When your attention is too easy to access, it loses weight. But when it becomes selective, when it is given with intention rather than habit, it gains significance. This doesn't mean you disappear completely. It means you control when and how you engage. You respond on your terms, not out of impulse. Another important layer to this is timing. Silence is not just about absence, it's about when you choose to be absent. If someone disrespects you, challenges your boundaries, or tests your value, your immediate reaction often gives them exactly what they want: attention and emotional confirmation. But when you pause, when you withhold that reaction, you break their expectation, and that disruption creates psychological impact. They are left facing their own behavior without your validation, and that is uncomfortable. Most people rely on reactions to measure their importance in your life. When that reaction is removed, they feel the shift instantly. It forces them to reassess their position with you. However, silence should never be your only strategy. If overused, it loses its effect. People adapt quickly. If you ignore too often, you become distant, unreadable, and eventually irrelevant. The key is balance, and speak when it adds value. Stay silent when it protects your value. Every interaction should feel intentional, not automatic. You also have to detach from the need to explain yourself. Not every silence requires justification. The more you feel the need to clarify why you didn't respond, why you pulled back, or why you took space, the more you weaken the impact of your action. Mystery holds power. Over-explanation removes it. And perhaps the most important part, your silence must come from self-respect, not manipulation. If your goal is to control others, it will eventually fail. But if your goal is to control yourself, your time, your energy, and your attention, then silence becomes a natural extension of your discipline. When you master this, people begin to feel your presence even in your absence. Your words carry more weight because they are not constant. Your attention becomes something earned, not assumed. And slowly, without force, the dynamic shifts in your favor, because in a world where everyone is trying to be heard, the one who knows when not to speak holds the real power. There is a hidden truth about human relationships that most people resist because it challenges their desire for certainty and comfort. You want to believe that loyalty is stable, that once someone proves themselves, they will remain the same. But people are not fixed. They shift with circumstances, opportunities, emotions, and self-interest. And the moment you forget this, you become vulnerable. Loyalty is not a permanent trait. It is conditional. It exists as long as the conditions that support it remain intact. When those conditions change, so does behavior. This is not necessarily betrayal. It is human nature. The mistake you make is assuming that someone's past actions guarantee their future ones. You anchor yourself to what they were instead of observing what they are becoming. Think about it carefully. When someone is in a certain phase of life, when they need you, when they benefit from your presence, when your value aligns with their goals, they show consistency, effort, and connection. But as soon as their priorities shift, as soon as they find alternatives, or as soon as their needs evolve, their behavior begins to change. It may be subtle at first: less effort, delayed responses, reduced interest. But these are not random. They are indicators of a shift in alignment. The danger lies in your reaction to these changes. Instead of adapting, you resist. You hold on to the past version of them. You remind yourself of what they did for you, how they treated you before, how strong the connection once felt. And in doing so, you ignore the present reality. You try to force consistency where none exists anymore. This is where expectations become your weakness. The stronger your expectation of loyalty, the more disappointed you become when reality does not match it. And that disappointment often leads to emotional reactions, questioning, confronting, or even pleading for things to return to how they were. But this only lowers your position. It signals that you are dependent on their consistency while they are already moving on from it. What you need instead is awareness. You must observe people not based on history, but based on patterns. What are they doing now? How are they showing up now? Consistency is not measured by what someone did once. It is measured by what they continue to do without being asked. This shift in perspective changes everything. You stop being surprised by change because you expect it. You stop assuming permanence in something that is naturally fluid. And because of this, you become less emotionally reactive and more strategically aware. It also allows you to maintain control over your own value. When you recognize that loyalty is conditional, you stop over-investing in people who are no longer aligned with you. You adjust your energy accordingly. You match effort with effort, presence with presence. You do not give more than what is being reciprocated. This is not about becoming cold or detached. It is about becoming realistic. You can still appreciate people, still connect with them, still value the role they play in your life, but you do so without illusions. You understand that every connection exists within a context, and when that context changes, the connection may change as well. And when you fully accept this, you stop expecting loyalty as something owed to you, and you start recognizing it as something that must be continuously earned and maintained on both sides. That is when disappointment loses its power over you. Most people believe that distance kills relationships, but the deeper truth is that distance reveals them. When you begin to pull back, when you stop initiating every conversation, when you stop being the one who always checks in, something uncomfortable begins to happen. You start to see reality. The illusion fades. The people who claim to value you suddenly become silent. The energy they once showed disappears, and in that silence, you are faced with a harsh but necessary realization. Most connections were never mutual, they were convenient. This is where emotional strength is tested, because your instinct will be to fix it, to reach out, to restore what feels broken, but you must resist that urge. The moment you chase, you lose the clarity that distance was giving you. Distance is not your enemy, it is your mirror. It shows you exactly who values your presence and who only enjoyed your effort. And when you understand this, you begin to operate differently. You stop overinvesting in people who give you little in return. You stop expecting loyalty from those who have never proven it. Instead, you become observant. You watch patterns. You notice who reaches out when you disappear. You notice who makes an effort when you are no longer available. And most importantly, you notice who doesn't. That absence of effort speaks louder than any words ever could. There is a certain power in becoming less accessible, not as a game, but as a form of self-respect. When you are always available, always giving, always present, people begin to take you for granted. Your presence loses value because it is constant. But when you learn to step back, to focus on your own growth, your own priorities, something shifts. People start to feel your absence. They start to question it. And in that moment, you regain control. However, this is not about manipulating others. It is about protecting your energy. It is about understanding that not everyone deserves the same level of access to you. The mistake most people make is treating everyone equally, expecting the same level of loyalty from all. But reality doesn't work that way. People operate based on their own interests, their own needs. And once you accept this, you stop being disappointed. You begin to move with intention. You give your time and attention to those who reciprocate. You invest in relationships that show consistency, not just words. And for the rest, you maintain distance not out of bitterness, but out of awareness, because you now understand that your value is not defined by how many people surround you, but by how many genuinely stand with you when you step back. In the end, distance is not loss, it is clarity. It separates illusion from truth, convenience from loyalty, noise from meaning, and those who remain when you no longer chase are the only ones worth keeping. So step back, stay silent, and let distance reveal everything.